You know, I told the story the other day. I was probably in Washington in my entire life 17 times. True, 17 times. I don't think I ever stayed overnight. You know what I'm getting at, right?
Okay, so what if I told you that what you just heard the president say was proof that Donald Trump is the ringleader of a shadowy cult aimed at simultaneously rooting out the villainous deep state, which has been secretly running the United States for years, as you all know, and a colossal child sex trafficking network? Well, if you thought that was dramatic and spurious, we're just getting started. Let me introduce you to QAnon, a deranged internet phenomenon trying desperately to elbow its way into the mainstream by sending believers with Q swag to Trump rallies. Q is the moniker for the movement's anonymous leader. He or she claims to be a high-level government official with top-secret security clearance, sharing breadcrumbs, in quotes, from time to time. And when Trump just said the number 17, that was apparently a nod to the group because Q is the 17th letter in the alphabet, and I know you all think I'm high, but not right now. This is the real thing that these guys do and talk about. Okay, the story here, though, is less about a deranged tinfoil hat conglomerate and more about the president himself. These QAnon people were noticeably present at Trump's rally this week in Tampa, and because of that, everyone's going to be on the lookout for the QAnon people at his event tonight in Pennsylvania. And in fact, we are already seeing QAnon people at the event in Pennsylvania. That's a picture from the event. There he is. That's the first sighting of a QAnon person there. There's some talk about license plates in the parking lot. We're going to have an orgy of QAnon discussion by the time we get to 12 hours from now and this rally's over. Clint Watts is back with us, and the rest of the table remains. I want to ask you a question because we talked about this last night. You freaked me out. We're sitting over there in the green room late last night before Brian Williams' show, and you said, I was talking about Russia, and you said, you're the Russia guy. You're like, wrote a book about Russia.
Yeah.
You said, I'm not worried about Russia anymore in social media. I'm not worried about Russia disrupting American democracy. I'm worried about QAnon. Why?
Because the playbook that the Russians use, this disinformation playbook, is being taken on by everybody. And this QAnon, when I look at it, is very American. It looks to be American-made. And it's more sophisticated in some ways. It's better production value. It's spreading very quickly. It's multi-platform. And it connects with conspiracies and takes on its own life. So it also is talking about there being a deep state or a government that almost needs to be overthrown. And they have a video that's called The Plan. Essentially, here's what we are going to do. This is the kind of stuff that leads to violence, public safety problems. You know, these conspiracies lead to elected officials being challenged with falsehoods. So this is what I'm worried about going forward. It's not going to be the Russians doing it, it's everybody else.
Can I piggyback on that? Because Clint is the expert. But I dealt a lot with Russian disinformation. And it's still going on. That's why it was so important what they did today, because there's no off switch, right? So if you take the Internet Research Agency, which Clint wrote a lot about, 55 Savushkin Street in St. Petersburg, they are still putting out stuff all day long and every day. I've been a recipient of it. They have very bad English. They can't even curse in a good way. These guys, if you have an American disciple of them that are using those techniques and knows how to use American vernacular, that is dangerous.
Yeah. It's much more effective.
I want to bring this back, as I said in the intro here, I want to bring this back to Trump, right? So you think back to 2016 and 2017, things we've seen. Right. You got Charlottesville and the swastika neo-Nazi folks. You've got people tweeting anti-Semitic stuff that the president was retweeting back in 2016. You've got anti-Islamic retweets. You've got David Duke. In every instance, the president has exhibited one characteristic, which is that if you like Donald Trump, he is loath to distance himself from you. Right. He gives license to all manner of vile behavior on the part of these hate groups and other malign forces. Is this QAnon thing the new version of that?
No, I think so. I mean, look, there was a kind of post-civil rights consensus, John, about how we talked about race. It was coded language, racial dog whistles, but it was all kind of underneath the surface, right? But with Trump's election, it's like, you know, the armies of Mordor storming the White House, you know, yelling, "Make America Great Again." And this is just the latest flank of it, right? Just the latest battalion. Because look at this, right? Steve Bannon's running around Europe saying we should wear our ethnic pride like a badge, right, with pride, right? And
That's
so
white pride.
White pride, right? And so here you have folks who are trafficking white supremacist logic. They're using language like globalist, which is deeply and profoundly anti-Semitic because they're talking about Jewish financiers who run the world, right? And they're stoking all of this kind of fear in order to really set the stage for, in some ways, disrupting the way in which we move about. And Trump has mainstreamed them.
I want to read from a story in the New York Times of your paper to talk about what the stakes here are and how dangerous this is. The paranoid worldview has crossed over from the internet and into the real world several times in recent months. On more than one occasion, people believed to be followers of QAnon have shown up, sometimes with weapons, in places that the character told them were somehow connected to anti-Trump conspiracies. In June, a man armed with a rifle and a handgun drove an armored vehicle to the Hoover Dam on what he said was a mission from QAnon to demand that the government release the Justice Department's report from its Inspector General on the conduct of FBI agents during the investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server. That is just one example. We know about Pizzagate also led to someone with a gun. There's a Michael Avenatti example. This is not just sort of fun and games here, and it's not even just like wacko. It's wacko conspiracy theories that are on the internet. This is crossing the blood-brain barrier into the place where people are showing up armed and dangerous. Talk about that.
Well, look, there has always been a lunatic fringe in American politics. It has never had somebody who's as tolerant of them in the White House as Donald Trump. He indulges it to a certain extent, certainly with the white nationalists, and to some extent here. Look, as a matter of tradecraft, John, as you know, these rallies are tightly cordoned, and if you come into one, you're searched by the Secret Service, right, and they open your backpack. If they wanted to keep Q signs out of this rally, they could. If they were worried about it, thought they were giving license to people who are going to go shoot up gas stations, right, they could do something about it. They're not. Right. They're not.
Here's the question. I want to end on this question. So the answer to this is what? The answer to this is sunlight's the best disinfectant. We should talk about QAnon in order to show everyone how dangerous and lethal it potentially is, or is it to ignore this stuff and not give it a platform? This is a raging debate in social media right now. What's the answer?
I'm a sunlight guy. I think sunlight is the best disinfectant. But at the same time, remember, it's a free speech issue. Q is not protected by the First Amendment if it leads directly to violence. That is what Brandenburg has said. That is what the courts have said. So when these guys start incentivizing people to go to blow up the Hoover Dam, they are not protected by the First Amendment.
Sunlight or ignore it?
Ignore it.
Ignore it.
And the reason why I want to ignore it is because then we can deal with it, right, under the cover of darkness. For real, for real. Because look, people like me and others, we have to deal with the real life consequences of these folks. And we have to raise our children in an environment that they are defining, right? So sunlight.
Fair enough.
Sunlight is dangerous for some of us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.